All right, welcome to another episode of Hoops in the P.N.W. Finally, I'm going to guilt her on this, but finally, we have our first female head coach on our show, and we've been kind of going back and forth. Kristina is much busier than I am, I guess, respectively, and so that's been a little bit of a challenge. But really excited to have her on board, and she certainly was going to be somebody that I first reached out to try to get on because she's a former player of mine, I can proudly say. And we'll get into that a little bit. But she is a head coach out at Inglemoor High School, also the Vikings. And we're going to get into some perspective, certainly from a female perspective, on being a head coach. We don't have nearly as many as we should, certainly, nor do we have as many, obviously, as we do male coaches in the girls' game. And so it's important that as we get off the ground, with this idea or concept, that we get some different perspective. And she also was a player, assistant coach, head coach, and so I think her background is going to be really beneficial to those that are just getting started, and especially those females that are looking to get into the game. I think she's going to provide some great insight. But Kristina Schumacher from Inglemoor High School is with us today, and I am very grateful and thankful for this young lady. So thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm humbled to be a part of the mix. You said a lot of it was because I was busy, but I also just felt I was a little bit out of my league quite yet. The coaches you've talked to and the coaches in the state are just have high remarks for them, and Ken and his structure and discipline, and
yep.
Joe with his disruptive nature and style of play.
Yep.
Coach Ballmer with his tremendous success, and as a young coach, someone that I look up to, and I probably older than.
Yeah.
Coach Mike over at Gonzaga Prep, just his longevity. And
yeah, for sure.
And then it was cool to actually start to listen to Coach Strophy, because he's one that I've watched at the state tournament over and over again. And I can't take my eyes off of his interactions with his kids.
Right.
And it's one of those, just one, how do I get from the bleachers to the floor?
Right.
Yep. But in a way where he was captivating to me, and so to actually listen to him and learn from him, and obviously Dan for his tremendous investment in the girls game. I just feel a little bit out of my league, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been I know I've said this multiple times. Selfishly, I've taken something away from every single person that we've had on, and certainly will do so today as well. And I think it's kind of reinvigorated my focus for the game. Certainly, obviously, the circumstances that we're in with COVID is kind of forced me not to take those things that I maybe did take for granted, not to take them for granted any longer, certainly. But yeah, it's been fantastic. And again, we're going to have some fun today. So make sure you do. I'm looking forward to it. So let's give our people some background. So I know, of course, you were a player, but give us some playing history, maybe a little coaching history, and then we'll go from there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm the type of person that I've kind of taken all the steps. I've progressed, made that progression, and that's the kind of learner I am. I kind of like to get my feet wet a little bit and then jump into it.
Sure.
So yeah, played for you. Played at Lake Stevens for 3 years, varsity for 2. Got to play at Everett Community College for 2 years. And that's where I thought my game in itself kind of grew.
Sure.
Got to play at an NAIA school in Portland, played a couple years there. And then moving back, had an opportunity to play on a semi-pro team, and
I forgot about that.
Yeah. I mean, Coach Roberts actually coached our team.
Yes, that's right.
Randy Richardson and Daisha.
Yeah.
Really, really good players that, usually one-upped me. And so now I got to actually be on the floor with them. So that was a tremendous experience. And then I remember exactly where I was in the conversation I had with you when you asked if I was in town and if I had anything to do and if I wanted to coach AV, and it just was such an easy answer.
Right.
And got to coach, with you and 2 legends for 4 years.
The Godfathers, as we like to talk to them about.
Yeah. And then, and after 4 years, I was like, am I cut out for this? And just kind of had to take my steps. So yeah, I think I've kind of made the progression a little bit different than most of the coaches you've spoke to uh, already, but thankful for the opportunities each person has had along the way.
Right. No, and I think it's great because, you've stayed connected with the game in some capacity, but in a variety of different roles.
Mhm.
And that's unique, I think, because, I think most of us have kind of talked about, well, yeah, we played to some degree but you've kind of, it seems like it's almost kind of parlayed itself into, okay, what else can I do with the game here? What else can I do to stay engaged and interested? Is there at some point where there was kind of the cue like, hey, I want to try this coaching thing out? Is there anything that maybe kind of in your mind said, hey, I think I want to give that a shot?
Um, I didn't really think of coaching until we had our conversation. In my mind, I was gonna invest in the semi-pro and
Sure.
play, and I played in a women's league with really good players and really good teams.
Yep.
So I was staying pretty competitive. And I think I fell in love with coaching. It was something that I learned to fall in love with. Because of the impacts you're making and the relationships you're making. But
Yep.
I didn't think that, when I was playing for you or I was playing in college, that one day I was going to be a coach.
Right.
Kind of someone saw something, you saw something in me, you asked me, invited me into the program, and yeah, fell in love with it.
Interesting. Cause I always like to think about, I was a distance runner, of course, as I mentioned a few times on this thing, but I always had a love for the game. And shoot, I can remember being a senior in high school at MP, drawing up plays on graph paper, and that was just more because the big thing to want to get back into teaching and coaching was what would be the quickest way to be a basketball coach, or what would be the quickest way to coach
Mhm.
cross country. And that was to be a teacher. So I always I think I wanted to be a coach first, but knew I probably couldn't be a coach until I got kind of the teaching side of things. So,
Yeah.
but for you, you kind of felt like, oh, this is kind of something that you fell into just based on kind of opportunity. And then all of a sudden it kind of blossomed from there.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it was an interest that came into a passion, and something that now I associate with my identity.
Sure.
I think in the last couple of years is the years where I've kind of really stopped playing as much, because it's really hard for me to play and not be competitive, but no, I'm not practicing and putting in the time to play at the level that I know I've played at. So I'm
Sure.
struggling with the playing for fun thing. So coaching has literally filled that void for me. Like I
Yeah.
can really make fun out of the game, where when I step out on the floor, if I'm not performing, or I'm already thinking in my head, I need to sit out, or I shouldn't take that shot. And
Hey,
so,
but does that differ from when I got to coach you as a senior?
but I knew that I was putting in the time, right? So it's like I knew I was putting in the work, and if I was having a bad game, it's like, well, at least I'm giving everything. But it's hard to go roll up into the gym and want to perform where you think you should be.
But there's still that, okay, Coach Edens has confidence in Kristina to go do the things that she's capable of doing. But yet Kristina kept telling Coach Edens, I just don't think I can do that. I mean, I remember pretty specifically, let's say, take Arlington, for example, Randy Richardson, and our ability to match up because she was supposedly this amazing D1 kid. But I was pretty confident in my own point guard at the time that she could stack up with anybody else. She just needed a little more encouragement than I think she was giving herself credit for.
Yeah,
There's still a little bit of that out there, I think.
absolutely. I'm probably I've like most of us, harshest critic, and I don't like to put myself in situations that I don't feel I'm going to succeed in. But
Sure.
sometimes it's a fault, or I'm not much of a risk taker, and so I don't know, preparing for the worst, sometimes not the best quality that I have.
Yeah, that's not something you want to carry over as a coach. Although all coaches do it. We think, okay,
Yeah,
what can go
exactly.
wrong right here?
Right.
What can be? All right, well, good. So I'm going to come at this from a couple different angles. The first one, of course, is we're talking about trying to keep our younger head coaches in the game. This is going to be year 5 for you there. Is that right?
I'm going into 6.
6. Okay. So this is good. So you're relatively just getting started. You've done a fantastic job of, taking a program that had some success, in terms of state level girls basketball. Um, and, you came into a program that, you wanted to create it as your own. And one of those big things that has kind of come along with it is, you're an outsider, which I think for me really helped my cause when I got the Lake Stevens job. But maybe some of the challenges that, you've come up with along the way. So, your youthful appearance, being female, what are some challenges that you've had as you've made that jump to, let's say being an assistant for me to being a head coach now? Can you speak to any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell myself I'm not doing year 1 again. So I'm at Inglemoor
Yeah,
until I'm doing something either completely different or not coaching. So that's
sure.
obviously if some life takes you in a different way, but that's my mentality. Like year 1 was it for me. And I'm glad I got the mentorship from you guys to get through that year, but it was tough. It was tough to walk into the meeting with a group of high school girls and them not even think that you're old enough to coach them.
Yep.
Being on a bus, sitting and almost being late to a game because the bus driver refused to leave until we had a coach's signature.
Oh,
I'm
geez.
like, oh yeah, that me.
Yikes.
And then I know parents in the community, they want the best interest. They have the best interest for their kids. So of course they're going to be critical and harsh. And I was willing to take all of that. But as long as whatever mindset and whatever thought process I had to make sure that I was able to convey it.
Right.
That's
Right.
the mentality I had. So you might not like that I'm kind of changing up
Yep.
what they did last year. And they were in a 3 overtime with Gonzaga Prep.
Yep.
At state for a title game. And here I am changing all of that.
Right.
That was really hard, but I had to know my stuff. I had to know
Sure.
why I was, what personnel I had. And essentially I needed to teach something that I felt comfortable teaching and
Right.
not trying to, I guess, fake something in order
Sure.
to please everybody else.
Yeah, or try to be somebody else. I think that's kind of the biggest, and we've heard that a couple times with some coaches where, ultimately you're going to be comfortable and do your best job when you're the most comfortable with who you are, not only of course as a person, but as a coach, and what, as you mentioned, trying to convey. You're trying to establish your own identity in your own program, and while things may have been fine potentially with who you replaced, in your mind or in your perspective, you're trying to make it better. And at the same time, go with things that you feel are true to who you are. And then ultimately you're going to set your kids to be successful.
Yeah. I mean, when I was having those conversations with you after year 4 and asking, how do I get into a head position? What should I do? And, I applied for 3 places and had all my interviews on the same day.
That's
NAIA,
right. Yes.
1, 5, all of them at the same day.
Yep.
And I just remember getting better with each one. Right. And Inglemoor was my last one.
Yep.
And I remember just being yeah, I nailed that one. I was confident in the other ones. Actually had really good conversations with that the boards at the other schools, but
sure.
I just remember being at my best there. And then I might.
You're still okay.
Okay. I might just can we pause for a second? So just plug in my laptop so nothing happens. Okay,
so we're back. We were dealing with some technical issues, and sometimes that comes up. But you had mentioned kind of the interview process. That's something actually we haven't talked about that I would love to get into, because I think that would be really helpful for those that are looking for those kind of opportunities and an approach. And I know I've mentioned it a few times on my end that I got turned down 7 times before I finally got my first opportunity. In fact, I got turned down by Lake Stevens in one of those 7 times before it kind of came back full circle and I got the chance. You had said just a second ago before we cut out there for a second that you'd had 3 in one day and you felt like the last one was the best. Is there a reason why you felt like, I mean, obviously the experience kind of comes along with it and those should naturally get better, but what did you learn in that interview process that made you kind of that much more comfortable, if you will?
For sure. I'll finish my note first when I was saying, with the struggles, we had all those interviews, got the
Right.
job at Inglemoor. But the part that was interesting was afterwards, and I expressed how everything went. And after was given the opportunity at Inglemoor, Berg had a conversation with me, and he said, out of the 3 places, you probably took on the toughest
Yes.
job.
Yep. No, that makes well, and to think about the timing of it, ultimately, I mean, you're replacing a team that was in a state championship game. Okay, so you had talked to Coach Berg after that interview process, and he had said that you kind of took or chose to take maybe the toughest spot. How come?
Because of their success at
Yes.
the Tacoma Dome, and then you're going to step in and finding the balance of doing what worked for them, but teaching your own things, that was going to be a challenge. And I just remember thinking, and kind of a testament to what you guys have said, when you had kind of the skill sets and the player, it allowed you to learn and grow in a system and in a culture. And I thought that Inglemoor had really talented, and they did, players for my first year. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be able to kind of introduce and try new things with this skill set. So maybe on the court it was a little bit easier, but as far as the culture as a community, that was probably the hardest one.
Right.
To make an impact in.
Well, and I think about too, when you get your opportunity at a program, and I'm sure everybody experiences this, it's about, finding that balance of, I've got to certainly coach the game, but ultimately your success in the long run is going to be about the culture that you create from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't take, that priority from the beginning, you might have talented teams that are going to win, but your success is going to be really choppy in nature. There's not going to be a consistency to it. Whereas I think if you look at those coaches that have been really successful, they have that consistency to it because they took care of that culture from the outset. Even if it maybe cost, who knows, a couple wins early in your career, or maybe a player or 2 here or there, it's one of those things. Now, it's interesting. We're talking about culture, and you're going to have a way better memory of this than me. But of course, the only person I've ever kicked out of the gym in my career was Rachel in your senior year, and so on and so forth. But in my perspective, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I felt like that needed to happen as a new head coach. What do you remember about that day?
It's hard because as a player and as a teammate, and her being one of my closest friends, you're looking out for the success of the team and what's going to help the team. At the same time, trying to kind of calm down the situation, but talk a friend off a ledge. And that wasn't getting through to her. So I think in the moment it was a tough thing, and it was a tough thing as the teammates. But looking back at it, I do think that it was a standard and an expectation that was set, and we were all able to move forward knowing that this is the level of expectations. We respect everybody in the gym. No one person is on a pedestal here. And I think that really, really helped our progression moving forward that season.
No, and I totally agree. And maybe this is me being too proud as a first-year head coach and what have you, and tried to establish standards, I guess is a decent way to put that. But ultimately, I felt like there was a little bit too much competition in the gym. In other words, okay, maybe I think this might be better, or, a lot of challenging, whereas, hey, we're ultimately not going to get where we want to go unless we're all on the same page. And, and I, as I addressed with her the next day, I said, hey, what happened yesterday is yesterday's news. I moved on from it. You need to move on from it. And we're going to be better as a result because of it. And ultimately she figured that out. And almost kind of grew into, she struggled at times. Why am I coming off the bench? And it was about, well, she got herself in foul trouble so many times starting for us. She actually learned to accept that too. Like, I get to see the game and how I can, have that much more of an influence and an impact. Whereas maybe I'm too anxious and amped up to start, but you bring those things together, and it's again about creating that culture that you ultimately need first and foremost as a new head coach when you're starting to establish your program and so on and so forth. And when I look at what you've done so far, you've done a fantastic job of identifying what your strengths are as an individual and as a coach, and then relaying those through your kids. And, I think a really cool example of that, and I was going to get to this a little bit later, but, I got to coach your kids in one game up at team camp up at Western, because you had a need, you were a little shorthanded. And I thought, wow, this is going to be kind of a fun thing. And, it was late in camp, but your kids were they were gracious and humble and on point, and everything that I got to know of you as a player, you could see through your kids and players. And that certainly says a lot about you and what you've done so far. So kudos. Okay.
Awesome. Huge compliment.
Really good stuff. What are some, and this is something we haven't gotten into yet. What are some advantages of being a female head coach? I'm a male coach. What are some advantages that you can help us maybe understand a little bit better?
I think the big one is just being able to relate to other females. Being kind of younger and then being a female, the girls can kind of unload a lot of things that they feel comfortable.
Sure.
Female coach maybe than a male coach. And I know male coaches are very nurturing and make their players feel welcomed and have any tough conversations. But there is that little sense of I trust her. She's motherly, and
Sure.
That's been a huge advantage. I'm thankful for that. I love that I'm youthful enough, and I'm blessed that I'm youthful enough to be able to demonstrate what I need and want, because as a young coach and new, it's not always the easiest to convey it through words.
Right.
And so being able to show and demonstrate things, I used to always tell myself I'll stop coaching the day I can't do a drill. Also something that'll probably change.
Yeah, for sure. You'll get over that shortly.
Yeah, and then I will have better ways of expressing what I need and want without, showing.
Right.
As a young coach, I think it's been really great that I always.
Okay, so we got a different background for Kristina here. She's going to be our first coach that's had multiple backgrounds, and that's awesome. I like that. So, but we left off with being a young head coach, being female, and certainly some things that will be easier for her to understand maybe than for myself as a male head coach. Although I feel like I certainly try, but do a reasonable job and can tackle. And shoot, if you know anything about our program, we've gone literally probably almost through everything I can think of with regards to girls hoops. But give us some kind of recap, some perspective from a female side of things.
Yeah, I forgot the last thing with this intermission that I was saying. But as a female coach, I think we already had touched on is the trust level and the comfortability that the girls have with us. And like, I remember saying that, when I said I can't do a drill anymore, I would.
Yep.
What I've really kind of prided myself on at this stage of my career is that I don't ask anything of the girls that I wouldn't do. So
right.
if one of our consequences is going to be X amount of running or whatever drill, would I do it? Could I get on the line and run that? Or
sure.
Am I asking something of the girls outside of the court that I wouldn't do? So,
and have you shared this with them before? I mean, like if there's that moment where you're asking them to run a set of lines, and again, I'm using a poor example here.
Yeah.
Have you said, hey, I'm not giving you something that I couldn't do myself. This is why. Do you kind of explain the rationale, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on those moments where if we're being tough or we're trying to maybe draw out a little bit of emotion out of our kids. It's like, sure. And then there have been times where our assistant coach Bill has been late, and he's 60 something years old, and he's gotten on the line and he's ran.
Nice.
So it's like,
nice.
It's just he's not we're not doing anything that we're not going to ask of ourselves.
I don't think I could get Coach Berg and McKinney on the line though. Awesome. No, that's great. And I know Jeff Wilson down at Lake Washington High School. He said a lot of the same thing. You know, he actually runs in practice with them, and he'll get done, and he's sweating just as much as those young ladies are. And I remember, you know, an open gym here or there for myself, but I was awful. I didn't want to embarrass myself. That transition from being an assistant to head coach, you spoke to this a little bit, but give us maybe some of the largest challenges that you faced as you made that transition from an assistant coach to a head coach. What didn't, maybe this is an easier way to go at it. What weren't you, what didn't you think of maybe as you know, became a head coach that like, oh shoot, you know, got anything out there?
Yeah. Number one was your hands in the select program.
Yes.
That was something that like, I thought my goal was the kids that are in that high school gym right there. Those are the girls I need to mend, mold, dedicate my time to.
Right.
And then years go by and you're realizing that there's this disconnect with the amount of time and energy I've been putting into our youth. And
right.
Reteaching every year is teaching, but if you start that early, a lot less teaching that goes on in the first couple of years.
Sure.
More it's fine tuning. That was something that Lake Stevens was so blessed to have, a really good cultured select program, and Inglemoor really needed more hands in it. And
right. No, I think, sorry to cut you off. I think one of the things that I wasn't aware of myself, probably really the same kind of idea. I got asked to shoot back when it was Alfie's in Lake Stevens at the time, to come to like a little board meeting for club basketball. And I understand, you know, head coaches need to be connected with their youth programs and so on and so forth. But, you know, they wanted me on the interview committee for these youth coaches. And, you know, I was like, man, much like you, my kind of focus early was, okay, I C team, JV, varsity, group, or at the time we had 4 teams back then, freshmen as well, where that should be my focus, you know, the high school levels and so on and so forth. Whereas in reality, it was about, hey, I need to have some engagement into that youth program, you know, 4 through 8 and club basketball. You know, one of the challenges that had come across was, you know, Mary Ochiltree was playing for ECBA, I think. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds right.
And the club basketball side of things was really frustrated because she wasn't playing Lake Stevens club basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And my stance was, well, shoot, we have somebody that's able to play at that high of a level. I'm not going to discourage her from going to play at that high of a level. You know, that's a good thing for us. And for that matter, opens up more opportunities at the club level for our own kids. But it is such a massive thing that you have to have, you know, be a part of, you know, that longevity, that success that you know, ultimately crave. What else? Anything else that you can think of that, you know, you maybe didn't think of making that transition to being a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, you don't prepare for the administration side of things or the parent conversations you're going to have. As a JV coach, those were kind of you. I was the fun coach or the coach that didn't have to do that. So being able to handle those conversations when there's a lot of emotion involved.
Yes.
Those are tough.
Yes.
I knew those were going to come, but those weren't going to be something that I could prepare for.
Right.
Until they happened.
Right.
We as coaches have always kind of used a thought process that success comes from some confidence, and confidence comes from preparation. And I just felt like I had to be as prepared for every single thing. So I felt confident in my delivery with every single thing. And then that allowed me to grow. So other than those 2 things, I really felt like you guys had helped prepare me in a sense where I was confident in failing. I was confident in succeeding, but I was also confident in making mistakes because I knew I did the back work.
Right.
And I failed, I did the back work, but at least I could tell somebody in their face and said, like, but this was my train of thought, and this is the amount of time that I dedicated to doing that. I felt confident in me.
Sure. Now, do you have a 24-hour rule with like parents, players in terms of if they've got an issue? How do
I,
you? Okay.
mhm.
I think it's probably the best just for all sides. You know, you need to decompress a little bit. And I think as a coach, it's, you know, if you know something's coming, it gives you a chance to kind of maybe look at things from all angles instead of maybe just your own. Okay, why is there that frustration coming from a parent? You know, let's look it through their lens, and maybe why is it coming from the player and their lens, and then ultimately you can look at it from yours and okay, where's that maybe miscommunication, or how can I be a little more empathetic or a little more clear, and
Yeah.
then you know, allow that value of that conversation, not necessarily take on the heated tone if it was, you know, just after the heat of the moment or the battle itself. So
I've had more positive outcomes where I've set a meeting or a time with a parent. We sat down and talked, and then they become some of my closest friends actually throughout the program.
right,
They're
yeah,
some of my supporters now that their daughters are graduated, but it took that meeting one-on-one to basically get down to it that my goal is basically to put your kid in a position to succeed on and off the court, and I'm trying to give them the confidence to feel empowered,
yep,
period, done. And so when they realize that that my motive, and my motive isn't my wins or loss, or my motive isn't that goes basically to put their kid at a disadvantage. We've
right,
built such good, strong relationships. And now, like I said, one of my parents that I've had those tough conversations with has come to some of our games last year, and their kid doesn't even play anymore. And
love it.
so, yeah, as long and if you can convey that your purpose is not to be a detriment to their kid,
Sure.
and
Well, and I think sometimes that's what gets lost from the player and parent perspective. You know, and again, we're going to all be guilty of that as parents. You get a little bit of that tunnel vision. I know I've had to talk to my lovely wife about certain things, maybe with Ella, and you know, shoot, she's in my own program, and maybe the expectations on her behalf. She kids me all the time because she feels like her kid needs to be playing more, and I have to remind her that she's my kid too, and I would agree. But you know, ultimately, she's allowed herself, you know, okay, why and what's the big picture here, and that whole idea. And I think that's sometimes what parents really, really need. You know, oh, maybe a little refresher, a little reminder of, okay,
yeah,
this is just something we're using as a tool to help our kids maybe have to fail forward. You know, maybe that's not a bad thing in this case. Maybe they've had so much success getting up to that point as players, you know, through their different arenas to get to the high school level. Maybe maybe this is the first time they've had a little bit of a struggle or a failure or what have you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, all things considered.
right.
Awesome, really good stuff. All right, let's talk about Inglemoor hoops. I love that shirt, by the way. I need that design template. I need something fresh and new. Um, Man, can we arguably say Kingco 4A is probably the toughest conference in Washington right now?
I would say it. I might have a biased opinion, but
I mean, I feel like I can detach myself from Wesco and if we were and feel like that, but you know, up and down across the board, my gosh. And then of course you combine both of our leagues in the district playoffs right now, and it's ridiculous just to try to find a way to get through there. Um, give us some insight to what do you feel about this Inglemoor squad
mhm.
next season?
Sure. First of all, with Kinko, if just to put into perspective how tough I feel in any given night, and I know a lot of leagues are like that. I know on the east side of the mountains, there's tough teams and
Yep.
whatnot. But you know, you see you beat Issaquah multiple times in 1 year, and then you see them place at state, and you're just like, that
Yeah.
was an opportunity that could have been for your group.
Yeah.
Going into overtime with Woodinville, taking you guys on, beating you guys one time at your place, losing at another, and so it's just, it is a tough league, and I'm blessed to coach in a league that I have coaches to learn from and grow from, where every single night you're going to be put to a test and challenged, and at the end of the day, we all respect one another. So
Right.
I'm super thankful for that. Next year, I know most of you, we didn't have a JV team this year.
Right.
Had 14 kids, 12 suited, 2 were practice players, and 2 managers in order to keep everyone involved. And
Yeah.
so and that was only with cutting one kid, and then a kid where we just couldn't put them and see them in a practice and be safe. So
Sure.
The number wise, we struggle with being pretty much a 3A school as far as student body, but a 2A school with the number of kids that go to Inglemoor that are athletes.
Got it.
We're so influenced by the academics and the IB program and running
Right.
stars,
Yep.
which drew me to Inglemoor. Like when I was kind of doing my pros and cons, I was like, I want a school that excels in academics because I'm a nerd myself. And so
yeah,
I want all of those things. But as the years have kind of gone, that's been kind of one of our biggest struggles, knowing that you're going to have to invest in your youth kids.
Yep.
And you're going to have to give them something that at the end of the day, take basketball out of it, take the ball and the hoop out of it. Do they want to be a part of your program? And so that piece of kind of building Inglemoor in the sense of we have to be bigger than basketball in numbers. Right now, I only know of one incoming kid, a freshman, that is an Inglemoor kid. However, we hadn't had an 8th grade Inglemoor select team. So she's been playing with the Woodinville girls, which great, but I see her walk into our gym.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. Like, I don't trust that she's an Inglemoor kid. We obviously lose some incredible talents. Lucy is going to a Division I school in UC San Diego. Caitlin was a 3-sport athlete all 4 years, varsity almost every single year.
Yep.
Going to Grand Canyon next year to just do school and intramurals and kind of do the college life. And
sure.
Then we had Ina, who I know we talk about this all the time. She's our program kid. She's a kid where if any kid comes out of our program, half the kind of kid she is, we are lucky.
Yeah.
And she was one that didn't play AAU and selfishly has been the most fun to coach because she only knows my way. She only she only knows our rotations. She only knows our offense. We're not teaching habits that weren't taught by us. Not everyone had, but just within your offense and stuff, you're looking for certain things. And she became a kid who was so significant to our success, and then one that just buys into our family culture. So next year we're excited because we have youth and spunk and a little bit of we're kind of losing that. I've been here, done that before, because now our kids are not at the been there, done that before. Now a lot of our girls that are going to be playing haven't been on the hard or are now playing minutes to help us get there. So excited for that. The staff that I have, we've spent hours and hours, long nights. There was one time we went to our assistance coach's house and we just sat for 11 hours at his house and talked hoops, and how, like, we had 2 full meals about where did we end up last year and what are we going to change with the pieces that we have in order to get better. So,
no, I love that. I know we all as coaches, we meet with our staffs and we have these different dynamics, but I know multiple times if it hasn't been like a state coaches meeting, you've had your staff over talking about things, or you really feel like that's a commitment that's going to help make your kids and programs better. What kind of value do you see in having that? What ultimately kind of makes that so significant that you feel like you need to have it with some regularity?
1 second. Asked me to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I said, the first thing I said, I sent a text message to Coach Nathan and Coach Taylor, and I said, I just don't feel right being on a Zoom call asking about a program without you guys there. Like, this is our thing. Your guys' work and all of that should shine through. I wouldn't be in this position without Lindsay Blaine, who's at Mercer Island now. Someone who was as dedicated and commitment into building a culture. And I honestly don't feel like I could sit right here without my first 5 years of kids, behind me.
Sure.
But we just believe in a co-coaching system. I actually had shirts made once and they list like head coach and assistant. And I was like, we're redoing these shirts. It's coaches and players.
Nice. Yeah. Love it.
We're all in one kind of a thing. And then telling the coaches or the players the same thing. Like, we don't like to separate ourselves from you guys in a sense that, you know, we're not calling you player all the time, you know, like
Right.
coach is a level of endearment in a word, but we have a name, you have a name, we're going to use it that way. And so I'm blessed with a staff that dedicates if not wants to do more than me sometimes, to a
Sure.
point where, you know, let's bring it back, let's not burn them out. But Taylor's hands-on completely, does all our workouts. She does things that I can't do anymore. So bringing on staff members that challenge me in that way. And then Nathan was a guy who runs kind of our select program.
Right.
And
Yep.
I would go to select games, and his daughter's not playing at the select game, but he's in the gym because he's a part of that family and community. And I just like, I gotta have him. I gotta have him on staff.
Sure.
He's perfect bridge between our select programs and our high school. Yeah, incredibly important to me. I'm nowhere in this position without the people.
Sure. No, and I love the idea, like you said, with your shirts there. You know, you didn't necessarily put that title with your name, because without those others that have, you know, fulfill those roles that you have assigned, or, you know, are playing to their particular strengths, it also gives them value in your players' eyes. You know, you're not necessarily separating yourself because you have the title. Each one of those coaches in your program has that much significance, that it helps give them credibility for what they do. You know, gives them some ownership, if you will. And because of that ownership and that, you know, essentially idea that they're a stakeholder, your kids are going to value that. And then, of course, respectfully, your parents, I think, would in kind too. At least that would be the hope, you know, ultimately. So, no, that's really good. I like that idea and that perspective. Now, obviously, we're in some unique circumstances with not being able to be with our programs. We were talking before we got started today about, you know, hypothetically we'd be heading to Gonzaga today, and man, looking forward to that, and so on and so forth. So what are some things that you got your kids or your players doing right now, in the meanwhile, while we kind of sit here and wait? Anything that coaches can maybe steal?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share. Also, collaborative idea with the other coaches involved. I know a lot of people are doing this, but we've started months ago with weekly challenges, like, hey, complete this circuit this many times. You know, when basketball was off limits, it was just a cardio or strength circuit. You know, watch one episode of The Last Dance. Like, we just have done something that keeps us in touch. And at the end of the week, we came together on a Zoom call and we were like, hey, how did that go? We started doing circuits together. On Wednesday, we're going to do our circuit 1 out of 3 times. Do it with us on Wednesday. And then Taylor had an amazing piece where she started assigning accountability partners. So your accountability partner this week is someone different than next week. And it's your job to make sure that you guys are staying on task. And we try to put a huge emphasis on accountability during this awkward time, because we want to make sure that the kids that are working super hard in order to get better in this time feel the same worth as the kids that might be more talented later on. And
Sure.
so, you know, if the kid that is really talented isn't doing the work, they're going to have to tell us. They had to tell us, and if you skipped a workout or if you skipped something, you had to say in that, you know, a Zoom call or on that text thread, I wasn't able to get the circuit done, you know. And so we were able to work a lot on accountability and leadership. We've done some leadership calls. We really value a two-way leadership where your leaders aren't just your seniors or the kids play the most. Your leaders are, I believe, from everybody who steps into the program. And if Lucy, our senior, who plays a ton of minutes, isn't giving her 100, we feel that Dulcie, our freshman, who is literally all over the floor giving everything that she has, should have the confidence to go to Lou and say, hey, I need something more out of you. And so we took this off time to really kind of hone in on that thought process and have these meetings with leadership and accountability. And then the last piece is we included our select program. We sent these challenges to all of our select kids.
Nice.
And we asked the parents if and when they completed a challenge, send it to the coaches. And we responded with an email saying, hey, we see your work, way to keep it up. And then we also had our high school players respond to them.
Love it.
And
Love
uh,
that.
my senior, Caitlin, she was like, Addie, this fifth grader sent me an email. I can't wait to watch her play high school basketball. And we're talking a fifth grader. So now
Yeah.
I've already invested a kid who's graduating
Sure.
in a program until this kid, Addie, who's a fifth grader, is, playing for us. So
Right. No,
um,
love that. That's such a
that's
great
a
idea. And
fun way.
no, that's such a great idea. And especially as we talked about a little bit earlier with regards to the significance of our youth programs, that's such an easy hook. They're obviously, we can't forget about all those guys. Everyone's going through this unique circumstance. And so if they've got a little bit of a distraction that connects you to the game and certainly program, maybe this is the one thing that kind of keeps them going. Love all that stuff. I love that accountability partner idea.
We're going to start that next year as well. We did exit interviews at the end of our season last year just to kind of see what you like, what didn't work on and off the court, and a
Yep.
lot of it was just those unsaid norms came up a
Sure.
lot.
Yeah.
And you can't always get rid of them, but how are we going to allow the aux cord on the bus? We don't do cell phone face anything on your face on the bus or in the gym on game days. So if you're listening to something, the whole team's listening to it, and it comes from the same people, like how are we going to allow the person who wants to play, like Abby Haller wants to play Journey, how do we give her the same kind of credit as Lucy, who's playing something completely different? So we're going to incorporate accountability partners next season as well. Like, this is your partner. Every time we do a shooting drill, that's who you're with, not your friends, not your classmates. That's the person you're shooting with. So
Journey. I'd love to know where those roots come from. Boy. No, Chris Brown, come on. You gotta have that buzzing. He's still relevant right now.
that was my Lake Stevens days.
Awesome stuff. I love those kind of things. And again, what great life skills to teach your young ladies too. Again, we've talked about this many times in this kind of format, trying to build better people. Again, this is such a small fraction of what they're going to do. And, sure, we're going to all have a couple that maybe move on to that next level, play collegially or what have you. But man, we needed to use this template, this, resource to really help, make our kids better people, and especially in this day and age with everything that's going on in the world, we need a lot more kinder, gentler individuals, no doubt. Let me look at my list here. All right. So we got to put this on here. So I know you do I'm going to talk about special teams here a little bit. So you do still a few Lake things that I've seen, but sideline out of bounds and baseline out of bounds, where have you got some of your stuff? Because it's really good. In fact, I've kind of resorted to the fact, I'm just going to give this away now, that anytime you guys have the ball side out of bounds, we're just going to play zone. We're not going to chase. We're going to play zone for the possession and call it good. But there's just some really unique things that you do that traditionally we see you spread people out from almost half court, it seems. Give me kind of where you're getting some of your ideas, and do you have a focus? Are you always looking to score sideline or base out of bounds? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Our thought process is, honestly, sometimes ball underneath the basket or out of bounds is a better percentage than the layup for us.
Sure.
We've put a focus on that. This is an opportunity to score. Maybe when a team is, taking a breath or a little bit hesitant, and so we think score first, and then our third, fourth option out of bounds play is to set up offense. So every single one of our baseline out of bounds plays have multiple scoring options. And then if that doesn't happen, there's an offense they know they're going into out of it, because we're already aligned in a way that the baseline or sideline out of bounds put us into.
Right.
So then it just looks fluid. So
sure.
So for me, I don't like to say that didn't work. I just said it worked to get the ball in, and we're gonna offense, I got a lot from those clinics, the Washington State clinics. Good. Going to watching some of my former players in college games, and then I watched them execute. Yeah. Then that really works. And if you could teach it at that level, then I think that we could
Yep.
introduce that here. Also, probably something that a lot of high school coaches haven't seen, because you're not all watching Central play. You know, you're
Right.
not all watching Sac State play. And I
Yep.
had chances to watch my kids play there. So, yeah, just picking and pulling from other coaches, but usually from the college coaches and then those clinics.
Love it. So you're just using a different angle there. The unfamiliarity, obviously we're all out and about scouting each other and learning what each other's doing. But if you're pulling from an angle, I've always been kind of a big international hoops guy, FIBA, those kind of things. And, it's amazing just the simplicity of some things that we're talking about professional teams, programs do that get baskets consistently. Sometimes that's all it takes is just the simplicity if you set it up correctly. And I think that's what I've been impressed with, things that you guys are doing. And I call them special teams, but, but based on a balance, it always just seems like, man, they're consistent looking to score in any type of scenario. And I like to traditionally think I've got the same approach, because I feel like there's sometimes that might just be the difference in the game is your ability to out execute somebody silent out of bounds or based on a bounds, because everything else is going to be equal, and
Right.
you've got to, it's another chance to, ultimately get an advantage. And you guys do a really good job of that.
Thank you.
Let's see. How are you as a coach? And you've spoke to a couple of these things already, but how are you as a coach extending your learning this summer? You got any go-tos that you really dig into?
Uh, my first thing is just learning my kids. If I can learn, I always say we had a 20 game season, I'm going to go to in the off season
Yep.
20 events of theirs, whether it's
Nice.
AU, someone's track meet, someone's
Yeah.
birthday party, like something. Like if I can just get out for as many games as they've given me in the
Yep.
season, like
Yeah.
I want to give back to them. So yeah, learning them first and foremost. I will go to any clinic in the area. I'm kind of envious of these stories that I've heard on the recent podcast where they're going to colleges and traveling and
Yeah.
like
No kidding.
watching practice. Like I need to get myself out and comfortable in making those connections, because I think I'd learn a lot. I think I'd learn a
Yeah.
lot in that sense. Like I said, I go to a ton, especially after basketball, high school basketball is over. There's a lot of college ball still playing.
Yeah, there is. Yep. Yep.
And so I like to watch and learn from a lot of their stuff. So
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I know the road trips these guys are talking about just in the Eastern Washington schools. I would be totally game for
yeah.
that. I think Dan had talked about this, especially with his trip to Yukon and seeing Gino and the Huskies there, and just he had talked about the things that he was picking up was just like the ability to communicate. That different level, and it's not that it's this foreign language. It's maybe the simplicity in which they communicate is much easier and more streamlined than certainly what we could get across as high school coaches. But those kind of things I think are just so invaluable. And I know Ken had talked about, he did the Wazoo, Whitworth, Eastern, Gonzaga. I mean, that whole, and just walked out of it with more stuff than
mm-hmm.
he'd ever gotten into like at any clinics. Those would be pretty fascinating to get into and dig into for sure. Well, good stuff today. I got one more for you, and then I've got a Zoom meeting I got to go to at 1. It's our last kind of teacher meeting of the year. So,
Yeah.
but being a young coach and certainly female in this particular case, but being a young coach and still being connected into that time frame, being year 6, what have you. What's some advice that you have for maybe young coaches that are looking to maybe take that leap, or maybe are a little hesitant about that next step? Any words of advice or encouragement that might kind of maybe push them to follow through on the interest?
Yeah. You you have to find the people that kind of have the same vision as you. And so if you have a good supporting cast, I think enjoying the process and not essentially the end goal
Yeah.
was something that I really had to change my thought process. I was like, we're going to do this, and this is what's going to happen. You're going to here, instead of saying
Yeah.
day by day, do I enjoy the people that I'm doing this with? Did I bring on people that share the same vision, share the same goals? And then really giving credit where it's due. That has been like my number one. Thank the administration for giving me a chance. Give credit to you, Gil Berg, for getting me into a position where I could be a head coach. You know, respecting the time of significant others, family members, respecting the time of, you know, the parents that are dropping off their kids and waiting in the parking lot to pick their kid up and take them home. I just, without those opportunities and without that support cast, I just don't think we're allowed to do our jobs at our best capacity.
Sure.
So, I'm super thankful. And like, we've been to state once in my going on 6 years, and we all know the year is 2018-19, but I like to say that we went to state from 2015 to 2019.
Yeah.
You know, like the kids that were able to be at that Tacoma Dome wasn't there because of, without the other ones behind them.
Right. Yep.
As soon as that experience was over, I even sent a text out to some of my seniors who had graduated and said, hey, we made it this year, but I just want to know that it wasn't possible without your last several years, couple years dedicated. But something that's really encouraging is that the group of people in girls basketball in Washington State are incredibly welcoming. They're incredibly intelligent, humbling, and no one wants to see, in my experience, anyone fail.
Yeah.
We've all kind of been there for one another, and I'm just thankful and proud to be a part of such a group.
Yeah. No, I think it's such a really cool thing. Something that honestly, I want to say like within the last 5 or 6 years in particular, and maybe it's just something that I didn't notice early on or felt like, and maybe it was just my own hangups that I felt like, coaches kind of had their own priorities and focus points. And we all certainly have our own, programs and teams and what have you. But I know like the last 5 or 6 years in particular, just exactly what you said, it's really seemed like, when we get to, playoff time, especially, or, state tournaments, as much as we're going head to head and against one another, there is so much support. Like if, one of the most challenging things that I, experienced was this year and you and I being in an elimination game. I was so, I was miserable when we found out. Let me rewind that even just a little bit. We get done playing Mount Si, we uber emotional and find a way to squeak it out. And then we find out that, GP had gotten you guys on our bus ride home. From that point to when we tipped, and obviously even after the game, it was just, it's miserable. It's one of those things that, again, we have so much support for each other, I think, as coaches, that I was so torn. And as excited as we were for our kids, I was miserable for you, and that support you speak of, I really feel that way more than I used to. There's no doubt about it. And that's something that's really cool, I think, about our game. And the communities that we're in, I think is a big part of that. But ultimately, when we think about the profession and all the number of things that we have in common, I think we have the same, for the most part, common goals and what we're trying to do. And, the success that comes along with it is a byproduct of our focus on kids and our communities and the ability to use each other as ambassadors for the game, I think, is ultimately what's grown it to the level that it is at this juncture. And that's something I think all of us can be really proud of. And again, hopefully with coaches like you, that are getting involved and having success, we keep you around, because again, you guys are kind of that next bridge to the next generation of coaches. So, but really, really good stuff. I want to thank you for joining us today. It's as your former head coach, even just for a year, you, as you said, you laid the groundwork for our success here at Lake Stevens. And I know I've said this, I think, early on, that, and I know it's a little bitter for you. You aren't on our wall of fame as a first team All-League player. There's yourself, who, if you don't reach out when I first get hired to want to do anything and everything to make a state tournament, I'm not where I'm at as a head coach without you. And, that took a risk on your behalf when, your senior year and, you could be checked out and want to be done, but that passion pursuit and the ability to show what kids and their interests are in having success you showed me what that was all about, and ultimately, kind of confirmed why I wanted to get into the business and profession. And so for me to see you kind of, parlay it into being a head coach yourself, and having the success, no surprise there, but to have the success, I'm tremendously proud of you, and always look forward to our head-to-head battles, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm proud of you.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back next week with our next episode.
Okay.